Slottle. Yeah, he got caught. What's going on, great people? Terrell Harris here, and this is
Brooke Harris eating popcorn.
Slottle. So, oh yeah, there we go. And you know what? We usually don't introduce ourselves. So I am Terrell Harris, and she said she's Brooke Harris, and we're pastors of the upcoming church plant, the Open Box.
I should be looking here,
Yeah,
not there.
Yeah, it's a little bit different today. We got a different setup. We're at home today. But some good news, we submitted our 501c3 application, so I am so happy because it was like 100 pages worth of information we had to fill out. And then September 18th, we will be launching our worship experience, so we're excited about that. So if you want to help out or if you're interested, email us at info@theopenbox.com. Anything else we should be telling them? Starting out?
Hey.
Happy New Year for those of us, or for those of you who are reconnecting with us for the first time. And we're going to get into it. So I want to do something a little bit different today. Not the typical Theology Thursday. So what's been on my mind a lot is this Flint, Michigan water situation. So we want to dig into that and figure out where exactly is God in this Flint, Michigan situation, or if God is actually even around or anything like that. So we'll talk about that today. And so the scripture reference I wanted to use is Job chapter 24, and it's verses 1 through 5, and it reads as follows. It says, "Why are times not kept by the Almighty, and why do those things who know him never see his days? The wicked remove landmarks, they seize flocks and pastures them. They drive away the donkey of the orphan, they take the widow's ox for a pledge. They thrust the needy off the road. The poor of the earth all hide themselves. Like wild asses in the desert, they go out they go out to their toil, scavenging in the wasteland, food for their young." For some reason, anytime I say that word in the context of church, I remember being a little kid and we used to say that in the Decalogue, and I used to laugh all the time. But we said ass.
You still laugh.
Yeah,
so.
it's kind of funny because it's like the only time you get to kind of curse, but not really in church. But anyway, let's get into the context. So basically, the reason I wanted to use this particular scripture is Job is right here. He's in the middle of complaining about God. He's having conversations with, those so-called people that are his friends. And the only thing I want to say about the context of this scripture is that Job is complaining that oppression and criminality flourish on earth, and God may not be present. So, get into the Flint situation, which is insane in general, and I'll go through some of what's been happening. But for those who don't know, in April 2014, in an attempt to save money, Flint officials decided that they were no longer going to use water from Detroit, and instead use the Flint River. And the problem with this, if you haven't seen on the news, is the water is 19 times more corrosive than the water that they were getting from Detroit, which was already pre-treated. So what corrosion is basically, there's a few things that makes water more corrosive, and either the pH balance is too low or may have some chemicals. And when the water may be too warm. So what happens is, because of these situations, if the water is corrosive, what happens is the pipes begin to wear down, and then that gets into your water system. So what's going on in the Flint situation is they switched the Flint River, which residents are saying they knew in advance that this river was polluted, and there's no way they should have used it because the river smelled in general. So there was lead pipes that lead to the homes, and I believe the pipes in the actual system were iron, but because the water was so corrosive and shouldn't be used, the lead's getting into the water. So when you see pictures, or when you Google like Flint water at a crisis, you'll see people holding bottles of water. You see how this is clear? They were holding bottles of water that were probably more close to like this color. So you see, like, it's crazy because you'll see like disgusting brown bottles of water that people were actually drinking and stuff like that. And what's even more disturbing about this particular situation is that this was happening since like 2014. So they made the switch actually they made the switch in April 2014, and a few months after that, people were complaining about the smell of the water, the taste, the people actually getting sick. And then there was so many backwards and forths what they were going to do with the situation. They got into politics because ultimately the switch was supposed to save the city $5 million. And then they finally
5 million or is it 500 million?
I
Just
thought
5 million.
I thought it was just 5 million.
Oh God.
I can correct that, but I thought it was supposed to save.
No, I don't know. I'm just asking for clarification because 5 million doesn't sound like a lot to me.
Yeah, but it was supposed to. Well, the population in Flint, I'll get into this, is only about 100,000. Which is still, a lot of people affected. So getting back into statistics, so they switched back to try to switch back to the Detroit in water in 2015. But at that point, the pipes were so corroded and so rusted, it didn't make a difference.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And the crazy thing about this, and looking at news and doing all the research I did today, they're 70 miles away from the Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
And the Great Lakes is one of the major natural water resources like on the planet. So they can't even, like if they were to try to reconstruct pipes or something like that, or try to get water using their system, they can't even get water because they would have to construct, a new system.
Mm.
So there's that. Now, this is where it gets to be problematic. So there are like over 8,000 or close to 9,000 infants affected by this, and usually lead poisoning is worse in children because some of the things it could lead to is poor muscle coordination, damage of the nervous system and kidneys, speech impediment, developmental delays, seizures and unconsciousness. And what they're saying is because if you have elevated levels of lead in the children, like it can get passed down from generation to generation.
Mm.
So also what's happening with the lead poisoning situation with adults, adults are kind of affected too because they could get high blood pressure, abdominal pain, constipation, joint problems, memory loss, mood disorders. And for the women, they could have premature births, and for the men, they could become infertile from elevated poisons of lead. So this is what's happening. Now let's get into the demographics of Flint, because what's disturbing about this for me, and one of the reasons I want to talk about it is because poor people in this country in particular always seem to be put in the most weird situations or crazy situations. It's like you're poor, doesn't matter. We're gonna give you the bottom of the barrel stuff. It doesn't matter if your water is corroded or corrupted or infested. Just go ahead and deal with it, and then it takes so much effort for people to actually listen, and by the time people listen, it might actually be too late. So let's give you some of the demographics of Flint, Michigan. So like I said, it's roughly 100,000 people in Flint, Michigan. Let's see what else they have here. 100,000 people. 41.8% of the people living in Michigan are living below the poverty line. 14.6% are at the unemployment rate. What would disturb me even more so, the median age in Flint, Michigan is 36. So these are people like our age or younger that are being affected, and they're parents. So there's a lot of kids being affected, and so people have also been moving out of Flint because the population since the census in 2010 is down 20%. The average income in Flint, Michigan is $23,000, roughly $23,000. So the cost of living is low. The median home price is $49,000. Median rent is $656. And Flint, Michigan is a 33 square mile radius city that has no grocery store.
Oh gosh, a food desert.
Yeah, so it's a food desert. So and this may be
crazy.
Yeah, this may be a short one, but that's okay. The question I have in terms of reading the scripture, thinking about this is, how can residents of Flint, Michigan experience God if they're treated like this, or if they're impoverished, if their water supply is corrupted? How exactly can they experience God, or what exactly are they believing? Because looking at some of the demographics as it relates to religion, They say 60% of the residents of Flint do not have a religious affiliation. Not meaning that they don't believe in God or anything like that, but anytime a stat is that high, I always wonder. And I think the African American population there is sort of like, I think it's maybe like 50% or 45%, if I'm not mistaken. But only if you look at the African American church statistics, I think only like 4 or close to 5% of them actually affiliate with a church. Mm-hmm. So you figure even the African American people there aren't going to church, and usually we're in touch with our spirituality, and usually African American statistics in some of these predominantly Black cities are usually higher. So how exactly are poor people in these situations actually supposed to experience God? Or is God like Job was saying, where is God in this context? Thoughts?
No, I think it's excuse me. You have to forgive me for eating popcorn, by the way. I'm very hungry. I think it's really tough because Flint, Michigan isn't an anomaly though. Like this has happened across the country, and it happens currently in many places that we don't know about, and it's happened, for years in so many different places. And so I think it's a tough question because, okay, I guess the way that I think about it is it's very weird because a lot of times when you think about people and you think about social justice and then you think about spirituality, a lot of times without knowing it, I think we separate them.
Oftentimes. I remember being at church and they passing out, I guess, a demographic survey. And I remember, this is before getting into seminary, I remember there being a question saying, are you interested in social justice? And I said, no. I was there. I mean, I was there at that point. I was just there for church and didn't realize the connection because at that point, there hadn't been a connection made for me in terms of what Christ did, my spirituality, and then standing up for rights. I mean, of course, I knew about civil rights, but because we were in a different area or era, it was just separated for me. So they were two different categories. So as it being related to spirituality, that didn't come till, once I got into seminary and experienced social justice at other churches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely think it's a tough thing because it's easy for us to separate them, but it's also easy to say when you're in poverty, oh, God is gonna, make a way, but really God works through us.
Yeah.
And so, and I have always believed this, that there is enough to go around. Like there's enough land, there's enough food, there are enough buildings, houses, all that stuff to go around. And the fact that we have so many people living in poverty, so many people who are hungry, and now we're hearing about Flint, Michigan with this water, which, I mean, it looks like watered down tea.
Yeah, it's pretty gross.
That's disgusting.
Yeah.
And this has been going on.
But peep this though. This is one thing I didn't say. They estimated that if they would have pre-treated the Flint River prior to making the switch, it would only cost like $100 a day to pre-treat. So they scrapped that and was just like, just go ahead and make the switch. And they made the switch, and this is what happened.
Because that's what you do when you prioritize money over human life.
Yeah. But it like this type of stuff doesn't happen in wealthy counties. Like it just doesn't. There's never concerns about water or food or resources.
Because you prioritize money, and when you have money, you don't have to worry about those things. And when you focus on money and wanting money, you don't care about anybody else.
Yeah. The interesting thing about this, as Christians, as people who are spiritual, even taking into account Muslims, because there was a Muslim community, I think, that donated a huge amount of bottled waters right outside of Flint, Michigan. How exactly, so the question was, how exactly are the people supposed to see God? What exactly are we doing to show that God exists to people who feel like they are living in hell. And the reason I asked that question is because I remember reading a book by Howard Thurman called Jesus and the Disinherited, I believe, where he talks about before you could offer somebody Christ, they have to have the basic resources. So they have to have food, shelter, and then they also have to understand that they're loved. So before you can even offer them or tell them about God, they have to have their basic needs covered. Otherwise, they won't be able to make sense of it. So you figure you go to Flint, you got unemployment situation, you no grocery store in 33-mile radius, and then you got water. How exactly are they supposed to experience God? Not saying that the churches don't help them do that are there, but how exactly can they have hope if the most wealthy nation in the world is not showing them hope? And I think I wanted to shoot this video more so as a challenge to people who are spiritual leaders, people who definitely have way more influence than me, because I understand the power of social media because I study it, I see how it moves. But man, there are some very influential people who don't say anything about these situations. I mean, people who could people who get people who want to buy jets to fly across the world to do ministry in these other countries. Not saying that ministry doesn't have to happen in those places, but man, Detroit, and is Michigan is right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just baffled, and I think for us, through the open box, we tend to try to do stuff for the homeless and for people in need. I think the next push is going to see I'm going to see how we could actually get involved and actually providing water, because it's ridiculous that people can't take baths or they have to be concerned about bathing, and they can't cook. I mean, because I remember.
And it's all, sorry, I was just thinking it's always interesting because when you think about the people who made the decision to do this with the water, where are they? Where do they live?
I didn't get a chance to dig into it, but I suspect that they don't live nowhere.
That's what's crazy. Like we vote to have certain representatives in office to speak for us, to do the things they say they're going to do, and this has happened.
I would go as far as to say that this could probably be classified as genocide.
Yeah, but they won't. They won't classify it as that. They won't, like, it won't be because, oh, it's just let's fix this. But if this happened, if a Muslim, somebody, whoever did something like this, oh please, it would be terrorism.
Yeah, it's all how the news and media treats it, and for some reason, I'm trying to wonder why the story didn't get picked up earlier. Because it should have been newsworthy a lot earlier than this. I think what happened is they may have had an election. I think the mayor switched and she called it a state of emergency, and then I think it started to pick up some traction after the council, the people were going at the city council and stuff like that. So finally, I think the other day, Barack Obama declared it a state of emergency as well.
Good. But it's crazy though, because like I said, you will not find the people who decided this living in Flint. I don't believe it for a second that they would be the same people who aren't drinking water and who have to go from place to place to find a place to take a bath. And I heard a woman, I think I was listening to the news on the radio, and I heard a resident there saying that she has to go from place to place to take a bath to find, good water. And I'm like, nobody should have to live like that. And there's too many people living like that. But like I said, we don't look at that intersection of faith, religion, spirituality with humanity, like with social justice, with like helping one another. Like we don't look at it like that. We've individualized it so much to where where you could go to church then back then and be like, oh no, I'm not interested in social justice because all you focus on is about, and I'm not being offensive, but all we focus on is about us. And I'm praying for me and I want this and just me. But we're all connected.
Yeah.
And we miss that.
Yeah, and you know what? I think so. When you look at church and the way church is set up, and then you look at social justice issues usually get addressed outside of the normal functioning hours of church. So church typically will happen Sunday morning. Maybe 10 to 15% of the members will come on Bible study. And in a social justice issue, if the church decides to address it as a group, may get addressed on a Saturday or another morning or another day. For some people who address the social justice issues during the day, it seems like they typically tend to be, from at least from my experience, they typically tend to be older because they're retired. Then they could do stuff. So it's almost as if the structure for church is not set up to address social issues as a unit or as a whole, mainly because the function of the function of the church is to bring members in the doors, service them in the doors, and then also raise funding to take care of the facility in the building. So if it's interesting because we go backwards and forth about how we're going to do service Sunday once the open box actually starts its worship. The interesting thing is, in order for the church to function, there has to be funding coming in. So the question that usually pops up for me is, if we decide to really do social justice stuff and really also do stuff as it relates to serving the community, what does that mean for people giving? Do they stop giving, or does the ministry kind of shut down, or do you have to make financial adjustments? Because then you're asking, or which will end up developing a totally different model, or will people even show up knowing that oftentimes people show up to a worship experience and expecting to get something as opposed to giving something away or doing work. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole different dynamic, and it's a model that doesn't necessarily, or I haven't seen a model that really exists, to where the primary function of the church is serving the community outside of the walls, that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, but I think it's just beyond. I think it's church, but it's beyond church, because many people who, we talk about separation of church and state, mm-hmm. but so many state and federal officials do things based on their beliefs.
Yes.
And so it doesn't really make sense to me
up until money is involved.
Things like this can happen, but when they run for office, they talk about their Christian values and all this stuff. But
2 Corinthians, right? All right, 2 Corinthians.
But then you have oh, that was hilarious. But then you have situations like this in so many cities, like Flint. You have like when you went to South Dakota.
And that always comes up every January for me. I wasn't even gonna mention it, but go ahead.
Experiencing what you experience with Native Americans on their reserve and everything, like in the level of poverty, like you have so much of this.
So when she talks about, I did a immersion to South Dakota, Pine Ridge, South Dakota, their reservation there, Lakota Native Americans. Average income $5,000. 80% of the reservation suffers from alcoholism in some form, whether it's passed down from generation to generation. And when I say, like, this is literally the poorest county in the United States. And when I say in terms of food has no taste. I remember seeing a small can of Lysol for like $9.50. As it relates to their vegetables, couldn't get, like, if I wanted like an eggplant or something like that, couldn't get eggplant. If I wanted like a kiwi, they didn't have no kiwis. I don't even think I saw mushrooms in their small little grocery store. And that was the only grocery store on the reservation. Otherwise, you had to drive far out. But it was weird though, because there were certain pockets of the reservation where they were made like these huge houses where I was like, wait a minute, I'm seeing poverty, but how is this house over here with these big wide windows? And from what they were telling us when we visited the city government, is the land of the reservation is so cheap, it's starting to become gentrified because people are coming in, getting the cheap land in certain areas, building up, and then they go out to work someplace else. So the land is being pinched from them. But yeah, that's what when she mentioned my
so
South Dakota trip.
This is
This is
how
great
we
old
live.
great old America.
Yeah, this is how we live. This is what happens, and it happens because of us.
Yeah.
And so, when you ask the question of like, I might be paraphrasing at this point, of like, where is God in this?
Yeah.
Well, God is in us, and if we don't choose to show God,
exactly,
then God is nowhere. And then you have people who don't have clean water to drink, who are going to have all sorts of mental health and biological problems that come about, who are going to stay in poverty because of us.
I think that's a great place to end. And before we close out, one of the things I want to share, especially with some of the stuff that we've been doing, it doesn't take a lot for us to help individuals out. This is not a pat on our back or anything like that. But I remember last winter when we did a fundraiser to do hats, gloves. We did hats, gloves, and socks for homeless people. Or the homeless individuals in DC. I think we raised something like maybe like $230 or something. It was a small amount, but when you purchase in bulk, we were able to do over 100 hats, 100 pairs of socks, and 100 pairs of gloves. So like the reason I want to mention that is if we decided to be the hands and feet of God, as a world, as a community, we can make so much of a huge change, because once we start pooling our resources together, purchasing these items in bulk, ultimately the cost goes down, and then we're able to impact more lives. So just remember, like, we are, for those of us who are Christian, for those of us who are spiritual, for those of us who believe in God, remember that you have to take care of your brother and sister, your neighbor, even the people who don't look like you or believe like you. And that is it. So that's the message for today. Again, my name is Terrell Harris. This is Brooke Harris. You can email us directly at info@theopenbox.com. Continue discussions. If you have any questions for us, let us know. And you could get us on social media at Mr. Terrell Harris, at Lander Brooke, and also at The Open Box. Peace and blessings. Have a good one.